Hello, everyone. My name is Aisiri, and we have a very special guest with us today. And it's none other than one of my favorite YouTubers, Dr. Jessica Liu. So, Dr. Liu is a postdoctoral research scholar at the Reach Lab at Stanford University in the Department of Pediatrics, Division of Adolescent Health. So, Dr. Liu is a graduate of the Population Health Sciences PhD program in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and she's an alumna of MPH program in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at Yale School of Public Health. And Dr. Liu's research focuses on adolescent health, substance use prevention, and school based interventions. Dr. Liu has published in many high impact journals such as Tobacco Control and JAMA Network Open, and her work has been cited to support local and statewide tobacco control policies. Dr. Liu is also very passionate about teaching and mentoring and participates in programs to support first generation and underrepresented students in STEM pursue higher education and research careers. So, I guess I can introduce myself now. Um, I'm Aisiri and I'm from India. I'm 18 years old and I'm pursuing my bachelor's in business administration and I'm majoring in finance.
I can introduce myself as well. My name is Audrey. I'm currently in high school and I'm very passionate about like environmental science. I'm very passionate about climate change. I started a youth group with my younger sister, who's Kathleen, in 2018, and today it's grown to 23 branches in 18 countries. So I'm super passionate about working with many youth across the world to achieve what they want to change in their communities in regards to the environment. I'm also super interested in like biofuel research. So currently I do some bioscience research like at a wet lab, as well as a university level research looking at biodiversity credits.
Hi, I'm Kathleen. I'm also in high school, and I co-founded the youth group with my sister, and right now I'm helping to manage some youth empowerment projects to get more resources to youth. And I love working with my peers and also I guess people younger than me to share more resources and empower them to create their own projects. Yeah, I'm super excited to learn more about you.
Oh, and Jessica, you can go ahead and share anything else you want to share about yourself or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I think Siri did a great job summing up my professional background. I just want to say that that's amazing the work that you all are doing in high school. I mean, I always say this when I was in high school, I was just running cross country and trying to do as well as I could in my classes. So I'm truly impressed by all the work that you all are doing and this organization that you've put together and all the work you're doing to bring youth together, which is a big part of the work that I do in my research as well. So really excited to also honestly learn more from you all than maybe you will learn from me. But yeah, other things about me, I don't know. Fun facts. I always say this, but I'm a fitness yoga instructor. I love reading. And yeah, that's and I have a dog, a new dog, newish dog that I got this past year. So those are just like little fun facts. But I do have a YouTube channel called Office Hours with Jess, which Siri mentioned. So that has a lot of these things that I just mentioned all in one place. And I'm sure you'll share that information along with this video.
For sure. And also, yeah, we also have a dog, so I love animals as well. Um, and I guess we can kind of jump into the interview. We have a few questions that we prepared. I think we just kind of go with the flow, like from there.
Mhm.
I believe I am asking the first question. So the first question is, what are some strategies for coping with climate-related stress and anxiety? And this question also comes from, I guess, also my past experience and my past journeys. Ever since I was really young, I've wanted to make some change or spread awareness with these environmental issues. But even amongst youth, I feel like sometimes the journey can feel really lonely. There aren't that many opportunities for youth to really make change in their communities sometimes. So I was wondering what you thought about that.
I just want to start off by saying that I'm not a climate scientist. I don't do environmental health research. So all my answers, it's going to be more about sort of like broader knowledge of what I know in this space and coming more from my work of what I do in adolescent health and not necessarily environmental health. Um, so I think just in general, adolescents right now are very stressed. And it's due to many reasons. And in the work that I do, I try to understand how that relates to substance use. But again, that's only one piece of the puzzle. I think that there are so many, and one of the big things right now is climate change, being, this really big issue. And I think at least in my work, I've noticed this link of like, when we talk about substance use, adolescents don't really care. But when you link the substance use to climate change and like environmental health and like how if you like smoke an like cigarette, it's like putting toxins and like waste into the environment, into the world, adolescents suddenly start caring about, these substances. So to kind of bring that back to your question of, what can adolescents do? I think it's a really big issue. And I think it can feel overwhelming sometimes that, I mean, I feel this way in general too. Like, I'm only one person. There's this huge problem that the whole world is facing. You really want to do something to, you know, just make this problem go away. I think the biggest thing is trying to kind of work along adolescents and empower them to feel like, okay, you don't need to solve the entire world's problem, but you yourself, like, there's so much that you can do as an individual for your community, your friends, your school, and kind of, setting that expectation that they don't need to solve the whole world's problems, and coming up with, like you said, ways of connecting students with each other so that they are not feeling like they have to do this by themselves. That's why I think the work that you're doing is great, that you've created an organization like, led by and comprised of youth and adolescents and students together. So I think exactly sort of these kinds of, clubs or organizations or nonprofits that are started, founded, led, and run by adolescents and students is, I think, an amazing avenue to go about making this change and feeling empowered to make that change. And yeah. And then, of course, just doing the usual, like taking good care of yourself, which I think can also be hard in times when there's like school, politics, climate change, everything kind of swirling around. So it's a lot. And I don't have the silver bullet answer, unfortunately.
No, yeah, I love what you mentioned, kind of like connecting like students. That's also really why, that drove us to start this organization. I mean, for instance, like I remember when I first learned about climate change, I remember it was like in fifth grade or something. I had asked my teacher, his name was Mr. Bopel. I was like, hey, Mr. Bopel, can I have like 5 minutes before class starts to, talk about climate change and talk about our impact on animals. And I remember like kind of getting ready this whole speech, preparing all of this. And then once I had gone up there to speak about it, I felt that, no one was really listening. I felt, sometimes, people were kind of making fun of what I was saying. So I definitely think like feeling lonely and feeling like this is like a huge issue that like you're responsible to solve. I feel like that is definitely impacting like people that I know and people that like around my age that I've like met before. So, and I also really like what he's mentioned about like self-care. I think that's super important as well. So leading that into my next question, it's more of a more general question. How do you think climate change affects like human health in general?
Yeah, so again, this is not my area of study in terms of like I don't understand, what PM 2 point. I mean, maybe I should consider I do study like e-cigarette and cigarette use, but I don't really understand, what happens when PM 2.5 goes into your body and all. So I can't speak to that, but I can say that in terms of I mean, I think obviously there are physical impacts. Like there's so much research out there. I can't even start citing, I have my best friends in my PhD program. They my two maids of honor at my wedding, they both studied environmental science, one more climate change, one, environmental reproductive health. So it's kind of like I was, my best friends are studying this. So I know that there are, the physical connections and all of that. But I mean, I would say kind of bringing it back to, what I see in maybe more the adolescent population and in schools and whatnot. I think it is creating this, um, you know, it is something that adolescents and young adults are stressed about. They care about this a lot. And I think given, um, you know, the future, administration coming into our, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about that here, but, given that there are a lot of political leaders that don't believe in climate change and supporting environmental science, I think that can add even more stress onto adolescents and young adults feeling like they're going to be living in a society and in a country where, at least here in the US, where, something that they really care about is going to be ignored by policy, leadership, etc. And something I'm concerned about too, as I think everyone, it doesn't matter what your age is. So I think the mental component, or the mental health component of it is very strong too, in like just like thinking about, what this might mean for our not just like distant future, but like very near future, like what this might mean for us and the people around us. I think that can also have a little bit of it creates a sense of anxiety and stress and disheartening feeling,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, Yeah, I totally agree. And it has like a lot of impacts recently, or in the past, I've also studied how, microplastics are affecting like human health, and how that's, combines also like impacts like the carbon cycle of our, planet as well. So I feel like there's just so many impacts of what we're doing that people don't really realize that are both impacting like our health and human health, I mean our health and our planet's health. I feel like it's so like interconnected, so it's pretty complex. Yeah. I think I Siri might have some questions.
Yeah, sure, I can go next. So, my question was that um, how can individuals contribute to reducing the health impacts of climate change? And I did read in a few places, I was browsing on the web and I got to know that Dr. Liu focuses on community engaged research work. So, how can that help in, kind of reducing the impact of climate change? And also, what relevance does that have into your research work, ma'am?
Yeah, of course. I think that I'll use this as an opportunity to talk about community engaged research, at least coming from a researcher's perspective, and then maybe how students can get more involved with that. But essentially, what I do in all of my research projects is that I strive to make them community based, or community engaged. So, what that means for me at the very minimum is that I involve certain stakeholders, and like, let's say I'm doing adolescent health research, like then I want to include the actual direct advice, opinions, thoughts, involvement of adolescents or students or school stakeholders, whatever, in the research that I'm doing from start to finish. And they're not just sort of like people that I go to when I need them, but they're actually active members. We usually call them a youth action board or a school advisory board. I have those two currently right now. And the goal is that they're, kind of like heavy participants in the research process, so that when I'm conducting my research, I know that, when I'm even just coming up with research questions or asking, creating surveys or interview guides to do my research, and then any interventions that result from that, I've had community members involved throughout the entire process. So I think that a way, and it's easier kind of said than done sometimes. So I think, and this is starting to become, I think, more and more popular in the field, especially in the field of public health. But if there are ways, for adolescents and young adults or students, to become, active participants in sort of the research or even the advocacy that happens that goes along with the research, like, helping disseminate research findings or helping with policy and whatnot. I think just being um, being a part of that process would help. But I know that there's also the like, okay, then how do you actually find these opportunities to join research? And I think that's where I think the field is starting to evolve and where we're creating those opportunities for community members to be a part of the research work as well and sort of bridging that gap between the two worlds. Did that answer your question? Sorry if that.
Yeah, that did answer my question because um, I mean, the place that I belong to, research is not even considered, you know, appropriate for people in high school and even in college. People don't even focus on research. Research is something which is not mainstreamed or, frontlined. People think that research is only for PhD scholars. So people usually go on a very traditional and conventional route. It's mostly like people do their high school and then bachelor's, master's, and for research, they do PhD. They don't even know that we can do research in high school and UG level, the undergraduate level. So people have not been exposed to the field of research. So usually the children or the teenagers who are doing research are just outcasted, and they're told that research is not true. You cannot find notable or solutions that can bring real world impact. So yeah, community engaged research does make a lot of sense when you are trying to kind of involve the stakeholders and the parties who are directly being affected by the research. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't start doing research until I was at my master's level, so well after, being an undergraduate student. And like I said, I think it's something that is easier said than done, and it's something that's evolving in the field. I think it's not the norm to have community members, especially adolescents, especially because, it's different. Like, once you have people under the age of 18, then you have to deal with consent. Like, it's not as easy as it is to just be like, all right, I just want to have all these adolescents and students a part of my research now. That's just not how it works. It takes time for the sort of like field to evolve and the system to sort of adapt to that. But I think that it is moving in that direction. So kind of on both ends, like from a research perspective, I'm seeing like, okay, like at least me and all my colleagues, a lot of my colleagues that I know are trying to do more of this involving youth, involving community members, involving stakeholders in our research, creating advisory boards, etc. And then I think kind of while we're waiting for this to be a little bit more of the norm practice and research, if there are students out there who are interested in getting involved in research and not necessarily, on these advisory boards, you're not like doing data analysis and helping, that's not because I think that can be a big leap, but you're more providing your own experience, your knowledge that you already have, not necessarily like diving into like statistics or anything. So it's not like getting involved in research doesn't always mean kind of like what people think it means. It can just be, again, kind of sitting at a more advisory level. And I think that I that's why I encourage like anyone, at any age, any level of school, should, if they have an interest in research, to not be afraid to seek out opportunities, cold email people, like if there are researchers who have youth action boards or advisory boards, they usually have that on their like lab website or something, and then you can email them and be like, hey, I would be interested. So I know that puts a lot of the work more on the side of students to find those opportunities, which I'm not always a fan of. I'm like, we shouldn't be making it even harder for students to get involved if they want to be involved. But I think right now there can be both sides of kind of like figuring that out. But I think that we are, making it better. And I guess I'll put a call. I'm always happy to find ways for students to get involved or adolescents to get involved. So, yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting because people really don't consider teenagers to be impactful enough to make a considerable change. But you really proved my point that even a little bit of help can make a lot of difference. So, I was reading your research article the other day, and the one which says examining the effects of health experts, friends, and social media influencers on young adult perceptions of Instagram, e-cigarette, and education messages. Do you have something to tell about it?
Oh yeah, that was a fun little study that my um, colleagues and I over at UMass Medical School did. So they were more kind of health communication experts, and we were just interested in understanding, okay, if we were to change, who posts certain e-cigarette prevention messages, and they were all Instagram posts, like is the person posting like the source of the message on Instagram, does that matter for, how the way people perceive that vaping prevention message. And we essentially found that it did matter, and that surprisingly, adolescents and young adults, actually, I think for this study, it was mostly young adults. We did find that we looked at, if it was just like a friend versus an influencer. So it had the little like blue check mark, and we try to make them look like an influencer. We told them it was an influencer versus like a science research institution. And we actually found that people really did, you know, they tended to trust or find the institution messages more appealing, or like kind of more persuade, have more message effectiveness, let's put it that way. So that's important when we're designing, not just designing our prevention messaging, but when understanding who should be even putting out these kinds of messages. So I can see something similarly like this being done, because I won't, I don't want to say like, oh yeah, this can be done for environmental health or climate change messages per se, but you could do a study. I'm sure there have been probably studies done. I can't say, or you do a similar thing where you take Instagram posts with like climate change messages, have different sources from the message, and understand, what people find the most effective in terms of like who's posting the post, and then you can use that information then to inform how to better handle future social media marketing campaigns in the space of environmental health and climate change.
Yeah. And also I wanted to ask, like, how do you like what are some of your thoughts on how maybe like companies or like policymakers, well, in general, kind of like systematically, how can we like kind of prioritize the health needs of like, adolescents or like other vulnerable populations in like the face of climate change and for their health in general?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question, and really I mean, I think it all comes back down to sort of like advocacy, and I think sort of it's not just like sort of one group that can like get this done. Like I think it is kind of a combined effort between, researchers, policymakers, school leaders, and then importantly, like youth themselves, kind of this like kind of mix of everybody coming together and advocating for certain policies to be put in place, for attention to be placed on certain populations. But I think it does require sort of this nice little puzzle of like everything fitting together, and every sort of stakeholder provides their own like sort of asset, or like, researchers provide the data, and that's regarding, and then, policymakers provide, their piece, and then, schools might do their thing, and then, the adolescents, the youth themselves provide the true voices that, this is impacting. So I think, again, it's that perfect soup of it all coming together. And like, we have a limited amount of time on this call, but I've taken like whole courses in public health that talk about, how do you work across like multiple levels of society and triangulate like across multiple types of stakeholders and groups, and it's difficult, you know. So I don't have the easy answer other than we need to try to do that coordination across multiple levels, across multiple types of stakeholders to get this work done.
Yeah, I really agree with that message that like everybody needs to be kind of like united and like kind of be sharing the same message and work towards the same goal. I think that's yeah, I think that's a really good message.
Yeah, it's difficult to achieve. I have to say, I'm like speaking sort of like I've never done this before. You know, I haven't been someone who's been able to get five groups across five, you know, like it's very difficult work. And I think this brings us back to the original point that you asked me at the beginning of like sometimes it can feel overwhelming because you feel like you need to be able to get all of these different people on the same page. But again, you have to realize it's not a one person or even a one group or even a one lifetime, one career kind of thing. It's like, again, that coordination between so many people. And that's why change does take time, but it's very meaningful. And like the more I think that youth, school students can come together and like work together on this because you all are truly the brightest minds that are out there right now, you know, when you come together, that's when the beauty happens and the change starts to take fire.
And then um I know like a lot of your work is focused on like substance use and like adolescent health. Recently I actually read a study relating how, climate change adds onto like the stress and anxiety of adolescents and how that's increasing substance use. And I was really wondering, if you've also seen that across your research, if like what you think about it, and are there ways that maybe schools can help combat this? Like, should counselors be talking about this? Because, besides like reading this specific like paper, I wouldn't really have connected these two things together. Yeah, I was wondering what your thoughts on that might be.
Well, send me the paper. I'm interested in. I might have stumbled upon it myself, but I'm curious. But yeah, send me the paper. But I don't know. I think so you say that, you know, you might not think that the two are connected, but in my head, I think everything is very connected when it comes to adolescent health because adolescence is this, I mean, I'm speaking to you all. You're in this time of development where you are figuring out who you are as individuals. I'm sure you all feel this way. I still feel this way. I mean, I'm not an adolescent age anymore, but I still feel this way too. You know, we're discovering who we are, what we're passionate about, and what we want to be when in the future. And that's a really stressful time to, you know, go through while also, you know, having all the other stresses in life, you know, family, academics, friends, social stuff, whatnot. So there's like a lot going on when you're going through adolescence. And you know, one of the first things that, you know, people might turn to when they're stressed is substances because substances do give you a quick sort of like buzz or hot, you know, whatever it might be, you know, and it's a lot faster to, you know, and it might be easier to do that than to, you know, get a school to completely change the way that they like handle mental health and environmental health and, you know, health education, all of that. So I think that to me, it makes a lot of sense why, you know, when adolescents are stressed, they turn to substances sometimes. And I think a lot of the work that my Reach lab at Stanford, the lab that I'm a part of, with my mentor, Dr. Bonnie Halpern-Felsher, so she is the founder and, you know, of multiple curriculums to prevent um, tobacco use, cannabis use, as well as now other drug use. And just she has a lot of curriculums. And in them now, there's always modules on, you know, just sort of mental health and coping and having that sort of be like a standalone module of like, okay, how do we teach adolescents like mental health and coping skills, kind of like separate from substance use, like because again, the two are so related. And then kind of going back to your thing about, you know, how do we connect the environmental health piece? And I think I mentioned this earlier too. What we're also finding is that, you know, when we tell adolescents like, okay, like you should stop using e-cigarettes, they're kind of like, okay, whatever, but when we say you should stop using e-cigarettes because, literally that e-cigarette pod that you throw on the ground might end up in like a dolphin's stomach, and you put on that, again, that's not exactly what I'm saying, but you know what I mean? You put on that environmental health impact, and then suddenly they care and like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be using that e-cigarette then. And so kind of that connection, we found that in kind of a lot of both sort of just like, I think anecdotally, but also in sort of research and data and qualitative data that has been done in this field. So I think there's been a lot of work to connect those dots more strongly in creating prevention materials and interventions. And I know that, again, in our lab, in our curriculums, we do have environmental impact lessons, and I don't know about entire curriculums, but definitely lessons on, why is it like the environmental impact of substance use. So, um, yeah, I think so. To me, they're very interconnected in my head.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I definitely think there are so many, stress factors nowadays, especially social media. I think social media can be like a tool that can help empower people, but it has also really impacted even like people I know, in very negative ways with like self-comparison, with and sometimes, these messages. Oh, I recently at school we actually watched this show on Netflix. I forget what it's called, but it was talking about like the impact of social media and how actually they found that like fake news spreads way faster than like true news and stuff like that. So I feel like there's a lot of power in what people post, what people share, especially for adolescents nowadays. And sometimes there are also messages that might make adolescents feel like they're like responsible, like that one single, like, which is true, every single like action that you do does impact the climate, but not to the extent where you feel like, oh, because you drove a car you are the cause of climate change. And I feel like a lot of adolescents nowadays can feel like super stressed out about that. And especially since we're probably going to be impacted pretty much in a few years as well. So yeah, definitely the interconnectedness. I'm seeing that more and more, as I'm learning more about these issues. Yes, it
Definitely.
was social dilemma. Yeah, it was.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think social media is, I mean, I think it has its powers and but for me personally, like I like block Instagram and like all this stuff because I've noticed it's not good for my mental health. I do the comparison thing all the time in my head and it's led me to like, not healthy places in my own mind. So I totally understand that and I think it's totally valid to feel that way. But yeah, it's kind of like it's hard because it's people love using it, but it's also so people it's hard not to use it. So yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, even I don't use any social media platform, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram. I'm in none of it. I'm only on, there's an app called WhatsApp. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's only WhatsApp and Discord for me. Discord is for work, and WhatsApp is for like friends and family.
they're more
Yeah.
communication and like texting. I use WhatsApp to talk to people in like other countries and stuff.
Mm. Yeah. But yeah, like on this topic of social media, but I do find that it's pretty hard, of course, not to be. And I know like some people might feel like FOMO, like without having those apps. And also, for instance, with a lot of like the work that I do, like Instagram and social media is pretty important because without that, we wouldn't have ever been able to connect with people in France or students across the world in Singapore or in places that even I've never been to. So there's just really this kind of struggle or battle on how to, balance that in everyday life. Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, I think those are all of my main specific questions. Kathleen or Isiri, did you have any more?
I think that's it for me as well.
Um,
All right. So I have one last question, and that is, what can the major like politics and, big people who have a greater impact on the society, and someone who has a strong willpower to enforce all the laws and policies and make people follow those very strictly, have a very good impact on the nation as a whole, a country as a whole. So, for example, I'm very fortunate to be selected as one of the student cohorts within which I'll be presenting my state, Karnataka. In the National Youth Festival, we have this thing called NYF every year, National Youth Festival, where 10 to 15 students from each state get selected to present their ideas. And I'm presenting on steering India into a fully sustainable future. So, our Prime Minister had a goal that by 2047, which is exactly 100 years before, like 1947 was the year when we got independence, and 2047, that's exactly 100 years of gap. And he wanted to see a Viksit Bharat, which means he wanted to see a fully developed India. So I'll be presenting ideas, and my idea basically revolves around making research centers at every schools and colleges, because we don't have research facilities or enough lab facilities. And I actually interviewed one of the facilitators for the CLF program as well, Tabor Axel Pauli. And he did say that not everyone in the US as well is involved in research. It's like only very few people involved in research in high school level as well. So I really wanted to make my ideas feel heard, and research should be mainstreamed. That was the whole idea. So, what do you guys think about it?
I think your idea is amazing. I think first of all, you mentioned that you're like, how do we get people to, sort of these people in power to listen to, us? And I think you're doing like that right step of, just taking every opportunity to get in front of them. Um, I think I forget when in this call, but at some point we sort of mentioned like, oh, how do you even like, make an impact if you're just, a student and you don't have these connections? And sometimes you can feel like you don't have the ability to make any sorts of, meaningful contributions. But, this is actually something that the Reach Labs Youth Action Board does. Is my the the director of this Youth Action Board actually, and in combination with the rest of the team, we actually train our Youth Action Board members to like go and testify in front of local, city, state, whatever level, senators and people who have policy making power. And because there are sort of hearings that are just like open to the public that anyone can go. You don't have to be like some like professor or researcher or politician or lobbyist. Like you can just be anyone. I went as a PhD student myself to go and like talk about this flavor ban policy in Connecticut, which is a whole nother story. But anyone can just go, regardless of who you are. And sometimes when you bring in a group of youth or just youth themselves, um, again, like they don't have to. You could be in high school. Like all these students are in high school. Go in and then they tell their story. That sometimes can be so much more powerful than like 500 research articles on one topic, because that after a while is kind of like, okay, like we understand, we get the data says this, but like, what is it that, like when you have someone standing in the room telling their story, like you hear that narrative, so I think it's great, Siri, that you're going to this event and that yes, present on like the importance of research, but tie that to like your story. Like, why is it that you're passionate? Like, why, like, what have you experienced yourself that has made you so passionate about kind of climate change, environmental health, and then link that to this is why I, want research to be everywhere in India and, kind of keep that going. But I think when you can always bring everything back to kind of like your personal story, because you all have one, that's why we're all here. of why you started to do this work in the first place, I think that can be sort of very grabbing in addition to all the science and the data. Which is why I think the work that you all are doing is so amazing. I looked up your kind of nonprofit organization before getting on this call, and Audrey and Kathleen, like you're talking about how you don't, you need to be on social media to make I was like, wow, you all have a lot of followers. I was like, this is amazing, the work that you all are doing. So I would just say to continue this great work that you all are doing, and you're inspiring me, and I'm sure you're inspiring other people your age, your peers, and your near peers who are, aspiring to be like you. So you all are doing the right thing. And I hope that it spreads to more and more people.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. Yeah, I love, learning about your work as well. And this has really been such a great opportunity. And I seriously thank you so much for putting this together. She actually invited us to be a part of this interview. So this is really a great opportunity. And I'd love to continue to stay connected with you, to continue to help or like learn more about like your work. I was wondering if any of us wanted to, continue to stay in touch with you, or if anyone else watching this interview right now would like to reach out, whether that be like a youth looking for opportunities or just wanting to learn of what might be the best way to reach out to you.
Oh, absolutely. And it's an open invitation. I'm putting that out there for all of you on this call right now and anyone who watches this video. Um, like I said, I think that you will hopefully share my YouTube channel. That is actually the best way of, I think, connecting with me, because I can give you my work email, but that, my institution might change. So actually the most stable way of reaching me, funny enough, is going to be my YouTube channel. So feel free to subscribe there, and then you'll have access to like everything about me. And in there is also an email address that I can also share with you as well, that I check on the regular, if you want to connect with me, meet with me. I love meeting with students one-on-one. If there's anything I can do, I will say that I don't have like direct connections to a ton of like internships or research. Sometimes I think I get a lot of calls like, "Hey, I can you take?" I'm like, I don't know if I can do that, but I can sort of point you in the right direction. So I can, at the very least, do that. But as I evolve in my own research career, I'm always going to be looking for adolescents and young adults and students to, again, be a part of my research process, as I've mentioned. So, that's why just truly adore all the work that you all do. Not adore, that's a bad word. I think I look up to the work that you all do, truly, and want to support it in any way I can. So if there's other things I can do to help your organization grow as well, please let me know.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I guess Isiri, did you want to close this out?
Yeah. When I was making the flyer, I just mentioned the word insightful, and I really think that the call pretty much sums it up to a very insightful session, because I did learn a lot of new things that I was not sure of before. And even if I did know a few things, it's more like it, the whole call, what we had, the entire conversation adds very delicious flavor into whatever I knew before. So, yeah, thank you so much. I
No,
really enjoyed the session.
absolutely. Thank you for having me.